is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Dark Lord of Derkholm by Diana Wynne Jones. Chapters 12, 13, and 14, brought to you by Patricia Bing-Grant. In these chapters, so I'm really excited that Scales is here to scare everyone into behaving, but I'm worried what happens when he leaves, because he can't stick around the whole time. Also, it turns out they're being purposefully sabotaged, which I did not even see coming at all. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Forgive me for sounding pretty rough today. I am still sick. I am doing this crowdcast in my pajamas, which are adorable, and everybody should own a pair because they're so cute. This was a really fun read. I think it's a real testimony to how much fun a book is that I could cancel this crowdcast because I don't feel good, and I did not want to do that because I wanted to talk about it. So this chapter 12 starts off with Blade, and he's going back from visiting his dad and seeing how he was doing and that whole thing. And he is not aware that his dad is like up and about doing shit because it happened so quickly after he left. But he is back at the camp and fucking everything is going wrong. First of all, Barnabas, I was like really suspicious of, because of the fact that he was so cheerful in this section. Barnabas is bringing these kites that are supposed to be enchanted in such a way to make them look like they're alive and stand in for the leathery winged avians. So, he's bringing this to them and he's got this sort of attitude about it that I thought was like strange. And then we find out later that there's like a spell on them that will keep them from being animated. And I have to admit, I did not, because of the way that the wizard who is helping Blade at the time phrases it, of course it never occurred to me that this was a spell specifically meant to keep other spells from working. I assumed it was a spell in place to help them out, but that somebody had forgotten to like notify them about. So, and that's what you're supposed to think, right? That's what the wizard thinks, because why would you think anything else? But I will admit to, like, leathery winged avians, Barnabas said cheerfully. He departed in his usual cheerful clap of noise, leaving Kit and Blade staring glumly at the kites. And I really was kind of like, he can see how badly everything is going for them, and the fact that he's so cheerful throughout all of this is just highly suspect to me. I don't really know what he's up to. I don't know if there's like a reason for this, or if he's like just sort of, maybe he doesn't like Dirk and like wants to see Dirk fail. I don't know. But there was something about his attitude that caught my eye. I was just like thinking of it in a more petty manner rather than like an overarching motivation. So yeah, the kites that they're supposed to be animating will not work. Kit once or twice got the things 2 feet into the air and sort of flapping, which, like, if there's a spell on them to keep them from being animated, and Kit is able to do that much, that's actually super fucking impressive. And I'm wondering, like, what kind, like, his magic is either stronger than Blade's or just of a different type than Blade's. And I feel like if Kit finds out that spell is supposed to keep anything from happening at all, he's going to be pretty proud of himself, and I think that he gets to be proud of himself. So then they try like just dragging them behind when Shauna she's going to be riding on Dawn, I think. And so they're thinking, oh, well, they can have it drag behind her, but it just looks like kites. It does not look like something alive, so that doesn't work at all. Meanwhile, all of these, Beauty. She's writing Beauty. Thanks. Thank you, Patricia. She's in the chat right now. So all of the soldiers that are in the dome are chanting that they have no food, which, like, what did you think was going to happen, dudes, when you locked yourself in there? There's not an unlimited supply of shit, and you were all so smug being in there when it was raining and feeling really proud of yourselves. And that's what fucking happens, dudes. So I really, like, I've reached a point with these guys, especially after what happens a little bit later, which we will get to, which is some shit, that I want all of them to just be poured into a pit and lit on fire. Oh yeah, you're right. Right here, Shona with her pile balanced in front of Beauty's saddle. Because they're sending them off to try and see if the wizards that are at each of the tours can animate the kites instead. Because they're more experienced, probably. It's not really supposed to be their job, but, like, you know, gotta do what you gotta do. So Finn is the wizard that Blade is supposed to go and deal with. And this is the one who says this has got some damn queer spell on it. I can't make it do a thing. Didn't your father give you a word to activate the spell at all? Which, like, the only thing about this that I found a little frustrating is that apparently Blade, like, goes home to get the geese, and he finds out that his dad is okay. Or not. Well, yeah, okay, pretty much. But he doesn't think to ask his dad about the spell. And I really wish that he had, because at least that would clear up the fact that the spell was not of his father's making and would sort of speed things along. But instead, hearing that his dad is there, he just decides to go on with the goose plan, which, don't get me wrong, the goose plan is hilarious. And I am a big fan. If for no other reason than to see a bunch of snotty, sarcastic geese, I want to see, like, an animated version of this book, please. I feel like this would make a really good, like, 3G whatever. Patricia's saying, but he knows the kites weren't from his dad. Yeah, but I feel like if his father was supposed to be in charge, he might know. You know, like, I would... That's just where I would go first, is to go to the person who was supposed to be in charge of this whole thing and try and get the information, figuring that Barnabas maybe told his dad, or his dad knows what the spell is supposed to be, or whatever. Or at least his dad could find Barnabas and ask him if he doesn't know where Barnabas is. But yeah, he goes with the goose thing, and I want to see this, like, really bad. These geese, and listen, if y'all have ever, like... Have you met geese? Because geese are the biggest dickheads of the animal kingdom. I swear to God. Like, I'm trying to think of another animal that is as mean for no reason. Swans, which are also in the same family, probably come close. But Canadian geese especially are the kind of mean that, like, scars you as a child. Patricia says bigger than dolphins. You know what, though? You're right, Patricia. I forgot about dolphins. Dolphins are more like smug assholes, though, whereas, like, geese are, like, straight up malicious. I find dolphins to be douchebags and geese to be, like, evil. Like, and I have so many friends who are, like, afraid of geese to this day because of shit that happened to them as kids. So the fact that he thinks to go to the geese and, like, motivate them to bully human beings is so fucking funny. And I love the fact that he doesn't know how to, like, get them to cooperate until Colette comes out and is like, oh, you know what you have to do? You have to dare them. I always get them to do things by daring them. And so she goes over to them and says, come on, geese, scaredy old geese. Daren't sit in a hamper then? Scared to climb in a big wicker box, are you? And immediately all of the geese get in right away. And they're just like, fuck you, I'll get in a fucking wicker hamper if I want. And the thing is that Blade tries to get Finn to stand next to him behind the basket so that he can cast his spell. Finn can cast his spell to make the geese look like leather-winged avians as they come out, but Finn is well out of the way of range of being attacked by the geese. Spoilers. Finn does not want to listen to what Blade has to say because Finn seems like kind of a pain in the ass. Like, he seems like an overall, like, decent dude, but also just really whiny about everything and keeps, like, just saying shit like, well, that wasn't supposed to be part of the agreement, or what am I supposed to do while you're gone figuring all this out? And it's like, dude, you're a grown-ass man. You know how old Blade is, and he's figuring this shit out better than you? Like, get your shit together, dude. So Finn does not want to listen. He's like, I can do it quite as well from back here. But he argues with Blade as Blade's opening the basket. Like, it's too late. Blade realizes that this guy's not going to hear what he has to say. And he's already letting the geese out. So the geese launch themselves at Finn and chase him. And they like attack the camp looking like geese. Which, like, okay, maybe geese aren't scary in like a mythical way as leather-winged avians, but geese are straight up scary, so I think it's probably still was pretty effective for the tourists. I think that's fine. So with the others who are obviously running into the same problems where their wizards are not able to animate the kites, Shauna had returned first and early because the wizard she had met had simply seized the armful of kites from her and marched angrily off with them. So I wonder what happens in that situation. Don's wizard had not been able to animate his kites. He didn't even do as well as Kit did, Don said, and he was furious. He made me swoop over the pilgrim party in the dark instead, and it wasn't fun. They shot arrows at me. We ought to have thought of the geese before. So again, he didn't even do as well as Kit did. Like, Kit's maybe going to be like a fucking juggernaut with his power. So they're all going to make use of the geese, and it's pretty great. I am here for it. I need these little bits of levity of shit going right, but like going right in the wrong way. Because this whole thing is an anxiety fest for me. Like, this is one of my worst nightmares, is like having a giant event that I'm supposed to be in charge of that is going really wrong, and going wrong in ways that I absolutely cannot help or control. No, this is hard to read even as a fantasy thing, even when it's funny. I still have this like low level anxiety about it all. I can't tell you what a weird relief it was to find out that this is orchestrated failure. Like, that this has been sabotaged just was so reassuring to me in its weird way. Because it just, it makes you feel like, oh, okay, it's not me. I'm not totally incompetent. It's supposed to be this way. But at least somebody is saying so. Sorry, my phone keeps buzzing, and I need to put all of my my do not disturb on, because that shit is just so tickly when it buzzes in my pocket. It was then we have in the middle of the night, because they're all so tired and distracted. The soldiers, when Blade thought about it afterward, were oddly quiet. He saw why when he woke in the dew-cold back end of night to bedlam and horror. What seemed to have happened was that someone among the soldiers had worked out that the magics holding the walls of their dome to the ground were only skin deep, and particularly weak where Kit had amateurishly sealed the opening. They might have spent all the previous day making plans. When they were sure that the comings and goings with the kites were over for the night, and everyone was truly asleep, they started walking up the wall opposite the opening. It must have taken hours, but with 600 strong men persistently stepping on one side of it, the dome gave way in the end. When Blade woke, the camp was a misty egg shape, filled with dark, scrambling people at the end where the bulge was. The other end was rising into the air. The dark shapes of soldiers were ducking under that end and rushing out. So that's a wild, like, basically the magic is like a bubble. So they're able to like stretch and open it, like it's like saran wrap that gets thinner the more you press it. And these guys, like, they start to really get fucking violent, and they go after Shona in a way that makes me feel like she was either raped or that she was like close to raped. Like, they definitely assaulted her, but I don't know how far they got with it. Because when Blade finds her, her clothes are torn up, but she isn't naked. And the thing is, you don't have to be naked to have been raped. So I don't know. It was unexpectedly dark, that whole like event with Shona. And I don't know how to feel about that being included in a story that is otherwise so whimsical and lighthearted in a lot of ways. Because like there are so many of these dudes gathered around Shona that he can't even see what's happening. Blade fumbled them loose from the magic reins around them and drove them fiercely toward the seething soldiers around Shona. This is the carnivorous sheep. He followed them in himself with the large stake the reins had been tied to. He banged heads and whacked arms and backs with it, and he seemed to make no difference at all. And all the time, more soldiers were getting out from under the dome of magic. Don was being hurt from his screams, and Kit's great roars went on and on. Blade felt helpless and hopeless, but he went on banging anyway. So this is just such a weird, like, it was just unexpectedly dark, and I'm not sure necessary. And I'm sort of surprised at this. Like, this is a sort of, in my eyes, misstep that a male writer would make, where they are going to include like sexual assault in their little story and act like it's not a big deal. And the fact that Wynne Jones is including this and then sort of tries to like shrug it off just a little bit later with the spell that Scales puts on Shona so that it makes it feel like it happened a really long time ago is kind of insulting. Like, if it was rape or not, it's still assault, and that's still going to carry its trauma with it. And it's still going to be something that, like, even if it did happen a long time ago, that's still leaving an effect. As anybody who is a survivor knows very well. So it being treated in this way, like you could just sort of with time you just get over it, and that's just what happens, which is not necessarily true. You can hope that's what happens, and oftentimes it can happen, especially if you are able to like get therapy and deal with it. But it being included at all, and then having that like really easy door of a spell to like get her past it, it just felt really cheap and unnecessary. And I don't understand why she felt the need to have this be a thing at all. Like, because it's very clear, if you were going to have the soldiers head for Shona, and you were going to have like people like realizing that she's in danger and helping her, that's one thing. You can understand what the soldiers are intending. You can see what the danger is. But she wrote it so that Shona's clothes are torn up, and everybody who comes near her, she's yelling at them, "Don't touch me." So it seems really clear that something did happen. And that's the part that I have a problem with, is that I don't feel like you needed to take that extra step. So that was just a little, like, it was disturbing and disappointing and just sort of baffling to me, including that in something that up to now has been lighthearted in a lot of ways. So anyway, let's go back to what's going on with Scales, because he shows up as everything is going wrong. And at first, I love this, because they fucking think, these soldiers think, that Scales is just an illusion and go on ignoring him. And this dragon, it turns out what he does next is an illusion. But of course, as I'm reading it, I don't know that. And I was just like, damn. It's only one of their illusions, one said. Scales bent forward, picked up the nearest black-clad body in his jaws, and crunched. The man jerked and let out the most horrible sound Blade had ever heard. It was not even a scream. It was the noise of something in more pain than it could stand. Scales tossed what remained of the man down on the turf. "In the dome or get eaten," he boomed. "Your choice." The rest of the soldiers untangled themselves with incredible speed and set off at a run for the dome. Kit opened the entrance there to let them in. A goose that had accidentally got shut inside the dome blasted out in a cloud of white feathers just before Kit sealed it again. After that, she was forced to stand with her back to everything, preening her dignity back, too irritated even to notice the rest of the geese, who stood at a tactful distance, hooting respectfully. So again, you have like these silly little moments here, but then you have Shona, the next paragraph. Ooh, excuse me. Blade was kneeling by Shona. Shona's hair was over her face and her clothes were torn. She had blood on one arm, but Blade thought that was from someone else's sheep bite. "Don't touch me," she said. "Are you all right?" Blade asked. "Just don't touch me," Shona said. So that's what I mean. We go from like this hilarious moment of this goose who's like trying to keep her dignity intact to Shona, the victim of sexual assault. Like, what? This is just not... These are not things that should go together. I really like this moment with Scales, he tells Blade to go back to the dome and hold the opening shut against the ones inside while Kit lets in the ones that Scales is bringing back. And he's watching them, and he yells out, "No, no," Scales said irritably as he arrived behind the third huddle. "Balance your magics against one another, brace them, and then just sway a bit to make the opening. Don't people do arm wrestling anymore these days?" "Oh, I see," Blade and Kit both exclaimed. "Like that?" "Yes, like that," Scales growled and swung around into the distance again. So this is great because, like, they can't go to wizard school, apparently, because Dirk is, like, prejudiced against it because it wasn't good for him. But they have a fucking dragon teaching them how to do magic and explaining shit in a way that makes no sense to me. Like, I think I get what he means, but they get it right away. And it's, like, a really cute moment of like, you know, teacher-student and unexpected learning and, like, a new way of thinking about the way the magic works. Which is just a really fun idea and a nice little moment with the two of them practicing. So they finish getting all of the soldiers in place, and they're about to, like, kind of sit down and, like, rest until they can get their energy back up. But Scales is like, "Dude, guys, you don't get to just stand here. You need to be on march by sunup." And everybody is looking at Scales like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Really?" And Scales is like, "Dude, guys, you saw what happened when you just sat here for a day. They fucked around, figured out how to get out, caused absolute mayhem, almost killed some people. Like, you need to keep them on the march, keep them busy, keep them tired. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to use their energy to fuck shit up. Also, you don't have food here. Like, they ate it all. And the only food that you've got is at the next station. So unless you want them to continue to get more angry because they're starving, then you're going to have to figure out how to get them where they need to go." So, and there are people who are hurt. Like, Don is hurt. It turns out that his wings are only bruised, so it's not as bad as he feels like it is, but Scales is able to help heal him. And then Shona, he goes and... let's see. Shona sat up as if the ground had burned her and stared upward cringingly into the dragon's huge eyes. After a moment or so, her body straightened and she seemed to relax at the same time. "Oh, that's better," she said. "Everything seems a long time ago, somehow." "Best I could do," Scales rumbled. He sounded slightly apologetic. "Try to keep it long ago." "I will," Shona said devoutly. "Blade, can you fetch me my spare clothes? I'm so bruised." "Oh, no, I'm not. How did that happen?" "I'll get my clothes. You lot go and round up the animals." Blade found himself beaming with relief. Shona was back to her normal and her bossy self. Really? Like, I really dislike this whole thing. It was totally not needed. All right, so that's the end of 12, and then we go to 13. And they're still trying to round everything up. And the only thing that gets away is the carnivorous sheep, which everybody's kind of like, good, bye. I'm really curious if those guys show back up in the story at some point, because I feel like you can't get leathery winged avians, but carnivorous sheep is a real unexpected threat for some tourists, and I feel like that would be pretty funny. Scales is like, basically prodding along all of the soldiers, and makes them get into lines and march like he's like left, right, to keep them, instead of like this scraggly sort of like group that's just shuffling along, he's making them be orderly, organized, and quick. And it's so much faster this way. And of course, there's no reason, like, I'm reading this for a second and just like, yes, see, this is what you do. But I'm like, who's going to have the power to scare them into following directions if it took this giant ass old dragon coming up to like convince these dudes to behave? And it's another like instance of, if you had just behaved from the beginning, everything would have gone better for you guys, but you all wanted to be dickheads about it all. And now you're suffering, and that's really just your fault. But it's not entirely true, because without instruction, they did, I think, on the first day, like the best that they could in terms of how far they traveled, and they didn't make it to the next, food drop point. So, all right. Blade wearily drove the cows. He was utterly and hugely relieved when, about midday, Scales bellowed, "Halt! Sit down! Rest stop!" and came gliding back towards the cows. Blade was even more surprised that the soldiers not only sat down, but stayed sitting. "Better milk those cows," Scale rumbled, stopping a tactful distance from the horses. "Give the pails to the catbirds to give to the soldiers when you fill them." And they milk the friendly cows, and they hand out the buckets, the pails. But instead of there being milk in the pails, it's filled with cheese. Little perfect little cheeses in the bottom of the pails. So that's pretty rad. And it's a weird lunch to just have cheese, but it's definitely the sort of thing that I think a lot of us have done. Those of us who are not lactose intolerant or vegan or whatever, I think many of us have had just cheese for like an entire meal once in our lives, because there are days when you just can't be asked, and that's the only thing that sounds any good. So I actually found this like kind of delightful. "I'll have one of those cows now," said Scales when Blade looked at him. "But," said Blade, "if I eat it in front of the murderers," Scales explained, "there'll be no arguing when I tell them what to do next." Scales did just that, with horrid rendings and mooings and much blood. To add to the effect, he tore off 2 large lumps and tossed them to Don and Kit. Both griffins were so savagely hungry by then that they ate the pieces ravenously. The soldiers went very quiet. But Blade counted the cows and found that they still had the same number. He rather thought Kit and Don might have been eating cheese. I love it. I love it. And this is when Blade is like, "So did you eat that soldier before though?" And Scales is like, "Nah, that was an illusion. I really don't like the taste of human flesh. Like, it's not my jam." So they finally stop, and Shona is like, "Oh, thank God we can finally rest." And Kit's like, "Not totally. We have the wild hunts today." And I guess none of them were expecting this. Like, it was supposed to be long enough into the journey, and none of them really realized that they had gotten to that part yet. And Blade is just like, "Ah, man, I am way too tired to deal with this." But that's because Blade thinks that he's going to be the Dark Lord. And he's going to be replaced by Shona this time. Because as it turns out, Scales needs Blade to hop around with his teleportation skills, and it takes a lot out of him to do that, and he needs to be rested. So they're going to send Shona instead, and Blade is going to sit and get a rest, which initially Blade is really irritated by. Like, he wants to be the Dark Lord. He feels like Shona is sort of like horning in on his thing that he was excited for, and just generally was excited to play such a huge role in everything, which is really understandable. But after his rest, he realizes, like, grudgingly, that Scales was totally right in organizing it the way that he did. Also, I love the details of, like, how they make everything look. They are, what Kit's doing is, like, he gave himself red eyes. He had transformed the friendly cows into great black horned things with ordinary eyes. Nothing would persuade the eyes of the cows to flame as Kit wanted. And the dogs kept shaking themselves irritably and losing their black coats and burning eyes in a shower of misty droplets. None of the horses would show the slightest change. Kit was looking a bit wild over it all. So finally, Scales comes in, and he decides, first of all, that the cows are not going to be able to keep up with Shona, who's going to be, like, you know, riding Beauty, I think, again. So they're going to cut the cows from the whole shebang entirely. And let's see, these game-playing pilgrims are going to see very little in the dark, Scales pointed out. Kit, you are black. You propose to turn the yellow catbird black, and you have a winged horse that is black. The other flying horse, though tiny, has wings that look like the ribs of a skeleton. All you really need to do is make the rider of the black horse black, and then you put yourselves in the air. Put yourselves in the air in front. Bring the dogs along as they are to make a noise. I assure you, this will be enough. The cows are far too slow to keep up. So he's just, like, kind of scaling back the whole thing and going for effective, like, what's going to be the most effective over what's going to be the most, like, impressive necessarily. Blade had to watch, bitterly disappointed and furious with Shona for hogging the post of Dark Lord, while two black griffins with fiery eyes — Kit did not think Scales should have things all his own way — and a horned rider mounted on a winged horse all flew slowly away northward, accompanied by a posse of excited dogs and one wildly skittish flying foal. So I guess the dogs are running along underneath them, and not flying, right? But I think that sounds pretty rad, and I would like to see that also. Why do you want me here? Blade said suddenly to Scales. One of you needs to be properly rested in case of trouble, Scales pointed out. You are the most useful because you can translocate. It made perfect sense, but it did not prevent Blade from feeling like Cinderella, or worse, Lyta. What did you do with the soldier you crunched? Eat him? And nope, that was an illusion. So everybody comes back, and while they are super exhausted, especially the next morning, it's clear that they had a fucking blast because they are in a really good mood. And so Blade is like, yeah, I'm well rested, but I didn't get to have fun, and I'm still, like, cranky about it. So the soldiers also, like, when they made this stop, there was a bunch of beer in the dome, and they drank and, like, woke up with this bad hangover. And Shona says it's nice to see so many people looking worse than I feel. And Blade's just like, I don't know about that. Like, they are so cranky and, like, ready to, you know, cause trouble because they're in such a bad mood that I feel like this could be dangerous. But as the march goes on, it seems like they kind of come out of their hangovers. The exercise helps a lot. So let's see. This is when a pony, like, comes crashing out of the woods, and stops short when it sees Scales and tries to go the other way, and then gets like tangled up in this basket that's strapped to it, and it manages to like extricate itself and run. But the basket is filled with gold cups and plates and bracelets and like all this stuff. It's all gold. And Don and Blade and Kit, I think, go to investigate where the pony came from. And it turns out that some of the escaped soldiers that, like, you know, because there was a bunch of them that just like got away in the very beginning, they are circled around what looks to be a bunch of dwarves who have a couple other ponies with them that are loaded down with gold as well. Oh no, it's just Don and Blade, but they think that Don is Kit because in the dark it looks enough like him. Don seized the soldier and threw him to the ground. He threw another on top of him as the first man tried to get up. That made 3 attackers down and was enough to turn the fight the other way. The dwarfs became very busy swatting with the flats of their axes. The ones who had been beating the plate joined in too, and within a minute all 6 men in black armor were rolling on the ground, groaning. Blade snatched the coil of magic reins that he always kept hung on Nancy's saddle these days, slid off Nancy, and made sure that he had a loop of reins securely wrapped around each soldier. So, it's obvious that the dwarves are a little bit like, their pride is wounded because they had to accept help to defend themselves from these soldiers when they clearly, obviously, thought that they would be able to handle them. And Blade is of the opinion that if they hadn't been trying to protect the ponies and treasure at the same time, they probably could have handled them. But it was the distraction and the extra effort doing that kind of broke up their energy. So he tries to like sort of cover the moment and says, "Your other pony dropped its load out on the grass and then bolted, I'm afraid." The one who had been banging the plate sighed. "Typical," he said. "This mission has been a pig's breakfast right from the start. You'd think we'd offended one of the gods. We had a landslide coming out of the mountains. We spent the next day mired in the rains. Yesterday was all horseflies and mosquitoes, and now this. If this tribute gets to Lord Mr. Chesney in one piece at the right time, I shall be so surprised you can cut off my beard and call me a giant. I kid you not." And this is like, you know, I didn't really like register this because there are so many things about the way this whole operation works that I don't know or necessarily understand, or maybe they've told me about, but I've forgotten. That the fact that they have to pay tribute to Mr. Chesney did not register for me as a problem. But Don and Blade are both like, "Excuse us? Why are you paying tribute to him? We do it every year. He requires it. He's our overlord." Well, how much further do you have to go? "Only as far as the nearest ocean," the first dwarf said with angry talkativeness. "That town where the pilgrim parties come through. They're calling it Gnosh or something this year. We're supposed to get there when the last tour goes out while the demons still got the portal open. Then the tour people take the tribute through and we leg it back home again." Does Mr. Chesney own the land where your fastness is? Don't think so. Then why are you taking him the tribute? Shouldn't it go to your king? "No way," said the talkative one. "Tribute goes to Lord Mr. Chesney because he's Dark Lord of the world. I thought everyone knew that." Blade nodded, thinking the dwarf was probably right, but Don said indignantly, "No, he's not. My father's Dark Lord." So this whole thing is just like pretty confusing to me. I'm going to take a sip of tea here, everyone. Please forgive me. Oh, that is soothing as fuck. But yeah, this whole thing, it turns out, like we find out later, is not supposed to be like part of the operations, and very well could be like a breaching contract. So that's interesting. 6 of the soldiers who escaped the other day were trying to rob some dwarfs, Blade reported. "We got them. Don's bringing them. But you know, Scales, those dwarfs are carrying a fortune in golden things. They say it's for Mr. Chesney, and I thought I smelled gold." Scales' vast head swiveled around towards the trees. "Oh, dear." So Scales is trying to be cool, but it becomes clear very quickly that he is going to find a way to track down these dwarves and get that gold for himself. I just feel so bad because I really want Scales to be like a good guy, like a civilized guy, which is what Shona claims she saw in his eyes when they like made eye contact during that spell. And I do like the dwarves, so I don't want them to get hurt either. But yeah, and Blade at first thinks like, because the way that Scales plays it is he pretends that he's going to just keep on with like helping them out and organizing everything until way later. So Blade at first feels bad that he doubted Scales would be able to resist the gold. Dragons nowadays did not have hoards except things like Colette's gizmos for the tours, and Scales seemed to be adapting to modern ways. He had to be, Blade thought, or he would not be helping them like this. The next camp came into sight soon after this. Barnabas had set it up almost tastefully beside trees that were beginning to turn gold or faint orange. Everyone made for it, thankfully. As soon as the soldiers were inside and Blade had taken the animals to drink at the nearby stream, Scales beckoned Kit and made Kit walk with him all around the camp, showing him how to seal the magics of the dome more securely into the ground. Wizard who did these camps did a rather sketchy job, but you should be safe for right now. I'm off for a while. I'm getting hungry and fancy a hunt. I'll see you soon. He's gone after those dwarves, said Don. I'm afraid he has, Blade agreed. And maybe he hasn't, Shauna disagreed cheerfully. He gave me a sort of insight when I looked into his eyes that time, and I was rather amazed at how civilized and learned he was. Anyway, we can't stop him, Kit pointed out. Blade knew Shona was wrong. He knew Scales was hunting dwarfs. The knowledge took the edge off even the wild hunt that night, though that was splendid fun. Blade came back with his hamper of satisfied avians and took off again with a black griffin on either side of him. With the weight of illusory horns on his head, Blade rode a winged black horse in the freshness of an autumn night under a growing yellow moon. Pretty had refused to come, but on the ground below the dogs bayed and yelped and belled and made a wonderful din, crashing through brushwood to keep up. Ahead of them, 3 times over, a small crowd of people made even more noise, running for their lives. The pilgrims were never near enough to see, to Blade's annoyance, and the hunt had to turn back each time after the tourists had pelted over a bridge across one of the rivers, because Kit said, the Black Book said, that the Black Rider was not supposed to be able to cross running water. But it was still great fun. It would have been even greater fun if Blade had not kept thinking of small pig-tailed men being crunched the way Scales had pretended to crunch that soldier. I agree, Blade, that sucks. And I feel like Scales has done a lot to earn his keep, and he should get to have a square meal, but why does it have to be a fucking adorable little dwarf? Of course, the dwarfs would be very angry at me for calling them adorable. So now we're back with Querida, and it's been a minute. Querida was in her sleep coma, healing coma, and it turns out like being in the coma, like being in a real coma, weakens you because your muscles like begin to atrophy a little bit. You just, you lose a lot of your strength, and she's still got bones that are not healed yet. So she's very weak and has to move slowly and just isn't doing great. And she doesn't have anybody to take care of her because everybody who's normally around during this point in the tours is off doing other things. And we find out pretty quickly what it is, but the only thing we hear initially is that this is a different situation than usual. So we don't find out exactly why she's all alone when she normally isn't until a little later. And the only person that she's got to help her is a janitor who doesn't know where to find anything. So if she asks for a cup of tea, he wants to help, can't. So here it is. The tours were not going to end just like that. So in order to help the prophecies along a bit, she had all the women wizards out around the continent organizing mistakes, failures, and trouble for the pilgrim parties. She was trusting Dirk to make a thoroughly bad job of being Dark Lord, and it was always possible that if things went badly enough wrong, Mr. Chesney might decide the pilgrim parties were unworkable. But there was that demon of his. Querida's plans there hinged upon the fact the demons were very legal-minded. For this reason, the women wizards were also looking for anything, any small thing, that the tours were doing which was not in the contract. Querida could then confront the demon and tell it that Mr. Chesney had broken the law and it was free to go. If Mara did her part as well, then Mr. Chesney would be faced with 3 ways the tours had broken down. Surely that would be enough to make even Mr. Chesney give up. I'm not so sure about that. I feel like that's very optimistic. And I guess we'll see. But I feel like Mr. Chesney is getting this gold. And, like, obviously, at this point, Querida doesn't know about that, but she will soon. I feel like the gold might be the more of the reason that Chesney is even involved in this. But I'm not sure what he's making from the Pilgrim Tours, so I could be wrong about that. So let's see. She had 60 or more pigeon messages to write. She hoped the janitor was up to fixing them to pigeons, the right pigeons, and setting the birds loose. She had no faith in the man. But first she would have to get down to reading some at least, of the great stack of messages that the janitor, after having explained it several times, had fetched from her study and piled on the long table. And she is fully expecting, as she goes through these messages, to find one that's talking about a breach of contract. But she can't, like, none of them seem to be saying that. They're all asking for, like, next steps. But they don't really have anything to report that's actually useful. Barnabas is the only one that's writing to her about, like, the actual status of everything. And he's not really doing too well himself. Dirk was turning out to be much more efficient than either of them had expected. With this in mind, Barnabas wrote, I have jinxed the avians and made sure the containing camps for the army are really flimsy. I am putting the base camp in the wrong place and will probably jinx that too, but I have to report that so far these measures have had little effect. She had been relying on pilgrims complaining about the Dark Lord. Perhaps it was a blessing in disguise that she had been injured herself before she could help Dirk with either a demon or a god. Or maybe it was the work of the oracles, in which case it was possibly worth all the pain. She had better drag her heels a bit over demons and gods, while pretending to be helpful, of course, and it might be an idea to nag and bully Dirk as well. In Querida's experience, most men responded badly to bullying. It got them making mistakes. Mara's activities ought to unbalance the man too, and get him doing things wrong. Dirk had to make mistakes. Had to. So here it is. Mara's activities ought to unbalance the man too. So I'm not 100% on this, but I think this means Mara being distant and making poor Dirk think that she's cheating on him or about to leave him is all fabricated to fuck his head up and make him, like, do a bad job, which is really underhanded and messed up. So this is when, what's the name of this griffin that shows up? Colette, right. This is when Colette shows up. And Querida is so in love with Colette. Loves this griffin and wants to own her and keep her so bad. I love this description. It had caught her fancy utterly the day that Mr. Chesney came. She loved the soft browns of the head feathers and the creamy white bars on the great wings. Now she saw there was gray in the bars, too, greenish gray, and that the same gray-green mixed with the brown in the massed feathers of the neck and outlined the alert brown eyes. The most beautiful thing about it, though, was the way the eagle part phased so gracefully into the pale brown lion part, a most elegant, deep-chested lion part with a slim and muscular rear, so that you did not think of the creature as a mixture, but as a whole. She had to admit Wizard Dirk had made a fabulous beast here. This one was even more superb than the little winged colt. Querida lusted to own this creature, to bury her hands in those soft-colored feathers, even maybe to ride on its back through the air. And then Querida finds out that Colette can talk and is even more like, what? Seriously? Like, just is trying so hard to figure out how she can keep Colette there with her. And Colette's delivering this message and tells Querida, first, I have a message from Mara that you get before the thing that you're actually here for. Mum said, I love this, to tell you that if you try to own me or keep me here by either a spell or any other way, Mum won't do any of the things you asked her to do, and the universe in this pouch will just dissolve. Disappointment made Querida cross. Mara had her over a barrel. She needed Mara. What a nuisance. Now she would have to waste time being very cunning and placating Mara. I see, she said dryly. What a very prudent person you are, Colette. But it beats me why you call two human wizards your mother and father. How can they be really? So she's trying to sow discord here a little bit and be like, well, they're not really your parents. It's just very unsuccessful right away because it turns out they kind of are. There's actual genetic connections there that she did not know about. And then she tries to be well, I promise to let you go, and leave it open-ended like that, which is a very fairy way of dealing with stuff. For those of you who read Dresden Files, where I'm not going to specify when, I'm not going to specify what that means really. I'm just going to say, I promise to let you go. And that could be 100 years from now and you're still keeping your promise. Colette does not fall for it. That's only promising me to let me go. You have to promise not to own me or keep me either in any way. Oh, bother. Fine. I promise not to try to own you or keep you either by magic or in any other way. And then she tries to just entice Colette to stay by telling her how beautiful she thinks she is. And the strength of this method is that it doesn't involve any lying, because she straight up does believe that Colette is gorgeous and doesn't have to flatter. It's all genuinely what she believes. And Colette is used to thinking of herself as not as beautiful as her brothers and sisters because she's not gold like they are. But Querida is I don't like the gold as much. I think it's kind of garish. I really, really like your coloring, and I think you're the most beautiful one out of all of them. So I really enjoyed that little bit of play-by-play. And I think that I kind of want Querida to get Colette a little bit, not get her against her will, but I think it would be fun if Colette decided that she wanted to at least hang out with Querida more than she has been. I find that sort of, it seems like a fun pairing. So, here it is. Okay. The message is that the dwarves from the Mossy Mountains are paying a tribute of 6 bushels of wrought gold items to Mr. Chesney every year. Dad has witnesses to confirm this. Mum says you ought to know. Breakthrough. This has to be unlawful, Querida thought. It did something to make up for not owning Colette, at least. But what was Dirk doing making this discovery? Did these dwarves have a contract to supply this creature? Or to supply this treasure? She asked. No. I went out there with Dad, and I heard him asking them. They said Mr. Chesney just ordered them to pay tribute 40 years ago because he was Dark Lord of the world. And when the dwarfs argued, Mr. Chesney told them it was to stop the dragons from getting too greedy. The chieftain said he thought Mr. Chesney might have been making a joke. Querida's snaky smile wrapped itself halfway around her face, which is such a great fucking sentence. Oh my God. I do not think, she said, that Mr. Chesney makes jokes. This was probably his true and actual reason. Did the dwarves say anything else? Yes, they said all the other tribes of dwarfs pay the tribute too. So, this is seriously a big deal. She wondered how he had got a hold on the demons, or if he had any bargains with the gods. That was something she must set the female wizards looking for quickly. I'm really curious why she says the female wizards, if it's just that she has a particular affinity for them, or because they all seem to be working for her. What was Dirk doing with the dwarves after he questioned them? I don't know. Nothing, probably. He got in his hurry. What a weird phrase. I don't think I've ever heard it put like that. He got in his hurry after he talked to them and told me to fly home and take Elda to Mum. So yeah, this then comes her trying to convince her to stay. And then it ends in this kind of sad, Querida sighed out a hiss of breath and stared at the table. Fancy being bested by a griffin. She felt ill and old and full of losses. She hadn't felt as bad as this since the day Mara's father left her for Mara's mother. What? That's a reveal. Long, long ago that had been. Still, she had coped with her feelings then, and she could cope with them now. She squared her shoulders and reached for the blank pigeon slips. Now that she knew what to tell the women wizards to look for, she had better tell them at once. And that is the end. Patricia is saying the male wizards are working the tours. So it's only male wizards that are busy working the tours? Because Mara's doing the tour thing as well, being the, like, what is it that she's being? Like the succubus, enchantress, whatever. So, but she's still, like, helping Querida while she's doing that. So that's really my question, is that it seems like she's only letting the female wizards in on the secret that she's trying to find something to, like, trip up Chesney. Only female wizard job is enchantress. Okay, so Mara's like an outlier. She's like the only one that's interesting. So we've got like a bit of a patriarchal thing going on even in this world. Okay, noted. Well, Querida, I kind of love her. I really want her to succeed in this. I am very curious what the fuck is going on with Chesney. Like, I'd be interested in a chapter from Chesney's perspective, just because I don't really get him. But I'm excited that we got Querida back, because I think it was just the last episode where I was saying that we hadn't seen her in a long time. So I'm excited to have her back in the mix right now, even if she's not physically as well as she could be. Maybe Scales can help her out. Maybe Scales can swoop up and save the day. I think that's everything. Patricia, before I wrap up, do you have any questions that you wanted to ask me? I really like Colette too, and the way that she was like so savvy in dealing with, and I think that's why I want Querida and Colette to be kind of paired up, because they both seem like they're smart and like trying to cover all their bases. And I just like smart characters with different motivations being paired up together, because it makes for some really interesting like sparring, verbal sparring a lot of the time, and like scenes like that where, you know, Querida is trying to entrap Colette, and Colette knows quite well what Querida is doing and just keeps being like, nope, not that one either. So I always like scenes like that where there's like something else kind of going on beneath the surface. Okay, no questions. Well, thank you very much for this commission, Patricia. Like I said, you know that it's good when I'm sick and I still want to talk about it. And I hope that all of you guys are enjoying the coverage of this. Please, if you are interested in picking it up, use my link, unspoiledpodcast.com/Amazon, to shop for your books and any other gifts for Christmas. And if you bookmark unspoiledpodcast.com/Amazon and use it to shop every time, you won't even have to think about it, but you'll be supporting Unspoiled every time you shop, which is huge. So do that. And thank you all again, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.